Reborn on the day the enemy breached the city gates. The princess's fate is no concern of mine. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. The copper doors of the Phoenix Palace shuddered under the rhythmic thrum of the battering ram. Dust sifted from the painted rafters, coating the intricate gold thread of the ceremonial robes laid out on the mahogany table. Outside, the sky was the color of a bruised plum, choked with the smoke of a burning capital. Qi Yun, put it on. Why are you just standing there? Princess Ning Jiawan's voice cracked, her fingers trembling as she clawed at the fastenings of her heavy, beaded collar. Her face, usually arrogant and porcelain smooth, was smeared with tears and soot. She thrust a bundle of crimson silk toward Phoenix Robe, embroidered with thousand-year-old pearls, the symbol of the sovereign's bloodline. I looked at the robe. The weight of it felt like lead in my hands. In another life, I had donned this silk without hesitation. I had let the enemy's soldiers drag me away, believing I was saving the light of the kingdom. I had endured their filth and their blades, only to be branded a tainted woman by the very king I protected. While Ning Jiawan watched my family's execution from the safety of her new throne. The enemy is at the Meridian Gate, Your Highness, I said. My voice was as cold as the marble floor beneath us. I did not take the robe. Instead, I walked to the bronze brazier where charcoal still glowed with a dying heat. What are you doing? There's no time, Jiawan screamed, her eyes darting to the door as a distant explosion shook the palace foundations. The general's scouts are looking for the phoenix. If they find you in that dress, they will think you are me. My father has already arranged the escape tunnel for Thetra Princess. You just have to hold them off for an hour. I leaned over the brazier. With a swift, fluid motion, I tossed the corner of the Phoenix Robe into the embers. The silk hissed. A tongue of orange flame licked the golden embroidery, blackening the delicate pearls. The scent of burning expensive fabric filled the room sharp, acrid, and final. You mad woman. Jiawan lunged forward, her hands outstretched to save the garment. I stepped back, my foot catching her ankle. She tumbled onto the floor, her silk underskirt billowing like a dying swan. The robe is ruined, Your Highness, I said, watching the fire consume the hem. A princess without her plumage is just a girl in the dark. Did you really think the heavens will allow a shadow to die twice for a hollow sun? My father will have your head. The Qi family will be ground to dust. She scrambled up, her face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. She reached for a ceremonial dagger on the table, her knuckles white. The king is currently disguised as a eunuch, fleeing through the northern sewer vents, I replied, my gaze fixed on her. He didn't mention an escape tunnel for you, Jiawan. He mentioned a distraction, and the distraction was supposed to be me. The heavy doors groaned again. A crack appeared in the wood. The screams of the palace maids outside were cut short by the wet thud of steel hitting bone. Jiawan froze. The dagger shook in her hand. They'll kill me. They'll do worse than kill me. Only if they know who you are. I grabbed a handful of soot from the edge of the brazier and stepped toward her. She tried to recoil, but I caught her by the hair, forcing her head back. I smeared the black ash across her forehead, over her cheeks, obliterating the royal markings. I ripped the jade pendant from her neck, the seal of her identity, and tucked it into my own inner sleeve. Now, I whispered into her ear as the wood of the door splintered. You are just a mute maidservant. If you speak, if you claim your title, they will realize you lied to them. And Ulehcha does not like being lied to. The doors burst open. The air was suddenly filled with the smell of horse sweat, blood, and cold iron. A group of armored giants stormed in, their furs matted with gore. At their head was a man whose presence seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Ulehcha, the wolf of the steppes. His eyes swept the room, landing on the burning robe and then on us. Jiawan let out a strangled sob and collapsed to her knees, burying her face in the floorboards. I stood my ground, my back straight, my hands folded hidden in my sleeves. I didn't bow. Where is the princess of Great Ning? Ulehcha's voice was a low growl. He stepped over the wreckage of the door, his heavy boots clicking against the tiles. He pointed his blood-stained saber at the charred remains in the brazier. Is that her pride burning? Or her body? I looked him directly in the eye. The phoenix has already flown. General, what remains is only the ash. Ulehcha narrowed his eyes. He walked toward me, the tip of his blade trailing a red line on the floor. He stopped inches away, the heat from his body radiating through his leather armor. He used the flat of his sword to lift my chin. You have the eyes of a hawk, not a servant, he remarked. He glanced down at the girl trembling at my feet. And this one? She reeks of royal perfume despite the dirt on her face. Jiawan shivered violently. I could see her fingers twitching. She was seconds away from pointing at me, from screaming my name to save herself. She is the daughter of the royal seamstress, I said quickly, my voice steady. She went mad when the first wall fell. She thinks she's a dog now. If you touch her, she'll bite. Ulehcha chuckled. A dry, rasping sound. He looked at the ruined robe again. I was promised a princess to grace my victory march. If the king has fled like a rat, someone must pay the debt of blood. The king has fled with the treasury maps, I said, the bait hanging in the air. But he left his most loyal commander, my brother Chi Feng, to die at the west gate. If you want the gold and the keys to the mountain passes, you don't need a princess. You need a guide who knows the king's cowardice. Ulehcha lowered his sword. He looked at me with a new, predatory interest. A guide. Or a traitor. A survivor. I corrected. One of Ulehcha's lieutenants stepped forward, glaring at Jiawan. General. The men are restless. This girl, mad or not, will suffice for the night's entertainment. Jiawan's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. She looked at me, her lips trembling, silently pleading for me to step in, to take her place as I had before. I looked at her and felt nothing but the phantom pain of the poison that had once slid down my throat by her command. The general's men should be careful, I said to Ulehcha, ignoring her. Madness is often contagious. However, the granaries to the south are being burned as we speak by the king's final order. If your men spend the night in the harems, they will wake up to an army with empty bellies. Ulehcha's expression hardened. He turned to his lieutenant. Secure the granaries. Round up the survivors. If she's lying, she'll be hung from the battlements by her own hair. He turned back to me, grabbing my wrist with a grip like iron. And you, Hawkeyes, you're coming with me to the west gate. If your brother lives, he'd better be as useful as you claim. As they dragged me out, I caught one last glimpse of Ning Jiawan. She was being hauled up by a soldier, her face pale, the soot smeared by her tears. She looked at the burning Phoenix Robe, then at me. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, she was the shadow, and I was the one walking into the light of a new, blood-red dawn. The smell of ozone and roasted meat hung heavy over the imperial city. Ulehcha's horse, a massive beast with a coat the color of dried blood, trotted through the wreckage of the marble bridge. I sat behind him, my fingers gripping the coarse leather of his saddle. Every few yards, a body lay crumpled, eunuchs in their fine silks, guards who had stayed to fight, and commoners who had nowhere to run. You said your brother is at the west gate, Ulehcha said, his voice vibrating through the saddle. He didn't look back. If the gate has already fallen, he is a dead man. I do not negotiate with corpses. The west gate is fortified with ironwood and reinforced by the Qi family's private elite, I replied, my voice steady against the wind. My brother, Qi Feng, will not break. He will hold until he sees the king's sign, a signal that will never come because the king has already abandoned him. Ulehcha pulled the reins sharply, bringing the horse to a halt in the center of the grand plaza. Ahead, the smoke was thickest. To the left, the royal treasury stood, its doors already battered but holding. To the right, the path led to the residential quarters of the high officials. My home, the treasury is there. Ulehcha pointed with his blood-stained whip. My men can smell the gold. Why should I listen to a girl who claims to know more than the scent of wealth? Because that treasury is a tomb, I said. Looking at the stone structure, the king knew the city would fall. He had the lower chambers filled with black powder and oil, The moment your men break the inner seal, the entire northern sector of the palace will become a crater. You will lose your vanguard. And you will have no gold to show for it. Ulehcha turned his head slightly, his amber eyes narrowing. He raised a hand, signaling his lieutenants to halt their advance on the treasury doors. One of them, a scarred veteran named Korgal, spat on the ground. General, she is stalling. Korgal growled. The Ning royalty are known for their silver tongues and black hearts. Let me cut her throat and we'll take the gold anyway. If I wanted to stall, I would have led you to the trap, not warned you, I said. Meeting Korgal's gaze without blinking. I want a deal. The Qi family name is to be struck from the execution scrolls. My brother is to be allowed to surrender with his men, and my father's estate is to be placed under Awolf's seal of protection. Ulehcha let out a low, dangerous laugh. You ask for the life of a general and the safety of a noble house in exchange for a warning. The price is too high. Hawkeyes. I am not just offering a warning. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. The king fled with the mountain pass keys, the jade tallies that control the hidden forts along the northern border. Without them, your army will be trapped in this burning city when the winter snows arrive. I know which sewer he used. I know which concubine has the tallies hidden in her hair. Ulehcha's amusement vanished. The air around him seemed to grow colder. He grabbed my chin, his thumb pressing hard against my jawline. If you lie to me, I will not kill you quickly. I will give you to Korgal, and he will take days to finish what he starts. Check the treasury vents. I challenged him. Smell the air coming from the foundations. If it doesn't reek of sulfur, kill me now. Ulehcha gestured to a scout. The man dismounted and ran to the side of the treasury, kneeling by a small iron grate. He sniffed, then recoiled, his face pale. He shouted something in their native tongue. Korgal's hand went to his sword, but Ulehcha's grip on my chin loosened. He looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and a new, dark respect. The Qi family lives, Ulehcha announced, his voice booming across the plaza. For now, Korgal, take 10 men. Go to the west gate. If a man named Qi Feng is still breathing, bring him to the Palace of Supreme Harmony. Do not touch the Qi estate. Anyone who enters it without my mark loses their hands. And the king? Korgal asked, his eyes gleaming. The girl will lead us, Ulehcha said. He turned the horse around, heading toward the northern gates. But first, we have a princess to collect. I want to see if she still smells of royal perfume when she's being dragged through the sewers. We moved quickly through the secondary courtyards. In the distance, I could hear the rhythmic clashing of steel from the west gate. My brother was still fighting. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face a mask of stone. We reached the entrance of the northern escape tunnels, a hidden stone archway concealed by weeping willows. A group of Ulehcha's soldiers was already there, holding a struggling figure. It was Ning Jiawan. She was no longer the pristine porcelain doll of the Phoenix Palace. Her face was smeared with the ash I had applied, now streaked with paths of frantic tears. She was dressed in the rough, gray wool of a maidservant, but her voice gave her away. Let me go, you filthy savages. Do you know who I am? She shrieked, kicking at the shins of the soldier holding her. Ulehcha rode up to her, the shadow of his massive horse falling over her like a shroud. He looked down, a cruel smile touching his lips. A maidservant with the tongue of a queen. How curious. Jiawan's eyes found mine. For a moment, hope flared in them. Qi Yun, tell them who I am. Command them to release me. I looked at her, my expression blank. The girl has lost her mind. General, I told you. She thinks she is a dowager perhaps. In her delirium, she thinks she is the master of those she once stepped upon. Jiawan's mouth fell open. You traitor. You servant. I'll have you flayed alive. Quiet her, Ulehcha commanded. A soldier promptly stuffed a dirty rag into her mouth. He turned to me. The tunnel. Hawkeyes. Show me where the Rat King has crawled. I pointed to a specific stone slab near the willow roots. 3 inches to the left. There is a pressure plate. It leads directly to the primary drainage system. The king believes it is his secret. But the architects were the Qi family's cousins. We know every brick. As the soldiers began to pry the slab open, I felt a cold satisfaction. In my past life, Ning Jiawan had used these same tunnels to escape while I was being violated in her bedchamber. She had emerged miles away, clean and safe, while my world ended in blood and fire. This time, the tunnels would not lead to safety. They would lead to the king's capture. General, a shout came from the plaza. Korgal was returning, his armor splattered with fresh gore. Behind him, held between two riders, was a man in battered silver plate. My breath caught. It was Qi Feng. His helmet was gone, his face bruised and bloody, but his eyes were clear, full of the fierce, unyielding pride of the Qi family. He looked up, his gaze scanning the plaza until it landed on me, sitting behind the enemy commander. Yuner, he croaked, his voice thick with confusion and horror. I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I simply held his gaze, a silent promise in my eyes. Brother, I said, my voice carrying across the quieted plaza. The king has fled. The city is lost. But the Qi family survives. Surrender your sword to General Ulehcha. It is the only way to save our father. Qi Feng looked at the gagged princess, then at the burning palace, and finally at me. He saw the wolf's seal scrap of gray fur already tied to my wrist by Ulehcha's own hand. With a heavy grunt, Qi Feng unbuckled his scabbard and let it fall into the dust. I surrender, he said, his voice cracking. Not to the wolf, but to the wisdom of my sister. Ulehcha grinned, a flash of white teeth in his dark beard. He patted my hand on the saddle. You have a sharp tongue and a sharp mind. Hawkeyes. Let's see if you can lead us to the king's throat as effectively as you led us to your brother's surrender. The dawn was a jagged line of gray light cutting through the smoke of the imperial city. We moved like a funeral procession of iron and blood. I rode a small mare behind Ulehcha's vanguard, my brother Qi Feng tied to a horse beside me, his hands bound with thick hemp rope. Around us, the outskirts were a shifting maze of burning villages and scattered units of the King's Blackguard elite killers left behind to ensure no one survived to tell the story of the king's flight. The Songyan Pass is 2 hours ahead, I said, leaning toward Ulehcha. The wind whipped my hair, stinging my face. If the king reaches it first, he will collapse the stone arches. Your army will be bottled up in the valley, and the Qi family will be buried under the rubble. Ulehcha spat into the dust. He looked at the horizon, where the mountain range loomed like a row of broken teeth. Korgal says the king's main force has already passed. Why would he trap himself? He isn't trapping himself. Qi Feng interjected, his voice gravelly and low. He looked at me, then at the general. The king has a secondary route through the Whispering Ravine that only the royal bloodline knows. He intends to use the Songyan Pass as a mass grave for his pursuers and the traitors he left behind. Ulehcha's grip on his reins tightened. He looked at the bound command. And why should I trust a man who was ready to die for that king an hour ago? Because that king sent an order to my lieutenants to execute me the moment the city walls were breached. Qi Feng said, his eyes burning with a cold, focused rage. He didn't want a general who knew his cowardice to survive. My sister saved me from the wolf, but the king had already fed me to the dogs. Suddenly, a whistle pierced the air. A rain of black-feathered arrows hissed down from the surrounding ridges. One of the vanguard riders fell, an arrow protruding from his throat. Ambush! Ulehcha roared, drawing his massive curved blade. The battlefield became a whirlwind of chaos. From the tall grass and the shadows of the roadside shrines, the Black Guard emerged. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like ghosts, aiming for the horse's hamstrings and the gaps in the armor. Take his ropes off, I screamed at the soldier guarding my brother. The man hesitated, looking to Ulehcha. Cut them. Ulehcha barked as he parried a thrusting spear. If he runs, kill him. If he fights, let him earn his breath. The soldier slashed the hemp. Qi Feng didn't hesitate. He lunged from his saddle, tackling a blackguard assassin who was about to gut my mare. He wrested a short sword from the man's grip and, with a single, brutal fluid motion, opened the attacker's throat. Yuner, stay behind the general's horse, Qi Feng yelled. His face already splattered with gore. He fought with the desperation of a man who had already died once and found the experience lacking. I didn't stay back. I scanned the ridge. I knew from my past life that the Blackguard used a signal mirror to coordinate their strikes from the high G round. I saw a flash of silver near a cluster of pine trees halfway up the slope. General, the ridge. I pointed. They have a commander up there. If you don't take that hill, they'll pin us in this valley until the king's demolition team reaches the pass. Ulehcha glanced at the hill. Then at me. Korgal, take the left flank. Hawkeyes, you and the general of the dead follow me. We charged up the incline. The ground was slick with morning dew and blood. My mare struggled, but I kicked her flanks hard, leaning low over her neck. Arrows whistled past my ears, one grazing my shoulder, tearing the silk of my tunic. We reached the crest of the hill. A tall man in a golden-laid breastplate stood there, holding a polished bronze mirror. It was Commander Zhao, the king's most loyal lapdog. He looked at me with a sneer of recognition. The Qi girl. Zhao spat. The king said you were a clever little rat. It seems you've found a new master to scurry after. I found a master who doesn't run through sewers. Zhao, I replied, pulling my mare to a halt. Where are the keys? The king wouldn't trust a coward like himself with the jade tallies. He'd give them to the man he intended to leave as a sacrifice. Zhao's expression faltered for a fraction of a second. His hand went instinctively to a pouch at his belt. Ulehcha didn't wait for dialogue. He swung his AV blade in a horizontal arc. Zhao parried, the sound of steel on steel ringing out like a temple bell. Qi Feng joined the fray, his movements a blur of silver. Together, the two generals, once enemies, now united by a common betrayal, pressed the commander back toward the cliff edge. The Qi family will burn for this, Zhao screamed, his back against the drop. The only thing burning today is your king's legacy, I said. Qi Feng delivered a crushing blow to Zhao's knee, forcing him down. Ulehcha's blade followed, severing the hand that reached for the dagger in Zhao's boot. I dismounted and walked toward the screaming man. I reached down and ripped the leather pouch from his belt. Inside were two cold, smooth jade tallies, the keys to the Sangyin Pass. We have the keys, I said, holding them up. The jade caught the rising sun, glowing with an inner, emerald light. But we aren't going to the pass to let the army through. We're going there to take the high ground before the king's sappers can blow the arches. Ulehcha looked at the tallies, then at the sprawling battlefield below. The Blackguard were retreating, seeing their commander fallen. You saved my vanguard, Hawkeyes, and you've given me the keys to the kingdom. I've given you a chance to win, I corrected. But the pass is still rigged. If we don't move now, the king will collapse the mountain on all of us. Mount up, Ulehcha roared to his men. He looked at Qi Feng. Can you ride? Qi Feng wiped the blood from his eyes and grabbed the reins of a riderless horse. I can ride, and I can kill. Lead the way. Sister, we thundered toward the Sangyin Pass. As we approached, I saw the silhouettes of men working feverishly atop the stone arches, the king's sappers. They were setting the final charges. Archers, I yelled. Though I had no rank, Ulehcha didn't correct me. He signaled his men. A volley of arrows soared upward, catching the sappers by surprise. Several tumbled from the heights, their bodies hitting the valley floor with sickening thuds. But one man remained, a torch in his hand, reaching for the fuse. The fuse is lit, Qi Feng shouted, pointing. The sizzle of burning black powder was audible even over the wind. In seconds, the primary arch would crumble, sealing the path and killing everyone in the bottleneck. I didn't think. I grabbed a throwing knife from Ulehcha's belt, a small, balanced blade, and flung it with every ounce of strength I possessed. It wasn't a warrior's throw, but it was guided by the desperation of a girl who refused to be buried twice. The blade bit into the sapper's wrist. He screamed, dropping the torch. It fell, tumbling through the air, and landed in a shallow puddle of rainwater at the base of the cliff. The sizzle stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Ulehcha let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a lifetime. He rode up to the gates of the pass and pressed the jade tallies into the ancient stone slots. With a heavy, grinding groan, the massive ironwood doors swung inward. Beyond lay the open plains, and the path to the king's final refuge. The pass is ours, Ulehcha said, turning his horse to face his army. He looked at the Chi siblings, and the king is trapped. I looked at the iron gates and then at my brother. We were alive. My family was no longer a sacrifice on the altar of a coward's throne, not just trapped. I whispered, he is judged. The Lushui villa sat nestled in a mountain fold, disguised as a scholar's retreat. But as we rode through the gates, the scent of expensive incense clashing with the musk of panicked horses gave it away. This was no retreat. It was a gilded cage where the king of Great Ning was waiting for the dust to settle, oblivious that the wind had changed. Surround the perimeter, Ulehcha commanded, his voice barely a whisper. Anyone who tries to leave through the back gardens is to be hamstrung. I want the king alive for now. I dismounted, my legs stiff from the frantic ride. Chi Feng walked beside me, his hand resting on the hilt of a borrowed saber. His eyes were fixed on the main hall, where the heavy silken curtains fluttered in the mountain breeze. He will try to buy his way out. Yuner, my brother whispered. He thinks every man has a price. And he thinks the Chi family's price was our father's life. The only currency he has left is blood. I replied. I stepped onto the porch, my boots clicking against the polished wood. We entered the hall. King Ning sat on a raised dais, still wearing his dragon-embroidered inner robes. Though his crown was missing, he was clutching a wine cup, surrounded by 3 trembling concubines. When he saw Yuzin, the hulking shadow of Ulehcha behind us, the cup slipped from his fingers, splashing crimson liquid across the white fur rug. Chi Feng, Chi Yun. The king's voice was high and reedy. He didn't look at Ulehcha. He looked at us as if we were ghosts. You were supposed to be holding the gates. Why are you with the barbarian? The gates are held by the living. Your Majesty, Chi Feng said. Stepping forward, you commanded my execution. Did you think the heavens would honor a contract signed in a general's blood? The king's eyes darted to Ulehcha. He ignored my brother and scrambled to his feet, spreading his arms. General, you are the wolf of the steppes. You understand power. These are mere servants. My daughter the Princess Ning Jiawan is yours. My treasury, the maps to the southern jade mines. I will give you everything if you escort me to the border. Ulehcha let out a dry, rasping laugh. He looked at me, a mocking glint in his eyes. He offers me a princess. Hawk eyes. But I thought you said the princess was a mad maidservant currently sitting in a cage. The king froze. What? Jiawan. She is here. No. She is at the palace. She is with your distraction force. Father, I said. The word father tasting like ash. In my past life, I had called him that with reverence. Now, it was a slur. Or rather, she is being treated exactly as you intended me to be treated. She is the shadow now. You swapped them. The king's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He lunged toward me, but Chi Feng's blade was at his throat before he could take 2 steps. Don't touch her. Chi Feng growled. General Ulehcha, I said, turning my back on the king. The maps he mentions are in the secret compartment of that dais. But the jade mines have already been flooded. He ordered it weeks ago to ensure no one else could profit from them. He is offering you a desert and calling it a garden. Ulehcha's expression hard. Eend. He walked up to the dais, kicked the king aside like a sack of grain, and ripped open the hidden wood panel. He pulled out a scroll, glanced at the seals, and then looked at the king with pure, unadulterated contempt. You would trade your daughter for your life, and then offer me a flooded mine. Ulehcha's voice was like grinding stones. I have seen many kings. Some are lions. Some are foxes. You are a leech. Wait. The gold. The treasury. The king screamed, cowering on the floor. The treasury is a powder keg. Remember. I reminded him, leaning down so my face was inches from his. The one you rigged to kill the invaders. The general's men didn't enter. They are currently redirecting the palace water lines to drown the fuses. You have no leverage left. The king looked at me, his eyes wide with a realization that came far too late. How do you know these things? You were a girl in the inner court. You should know nothing but embroidery and music. In one life, perhaps, I whispered, so low the others couldn't hear. But in the life where you watched my father beheaded and sent me to the enemy's tents to be torn apart, I learned everything you ever hid. I stood up and looked at Ulehcha. The king is useless to you as a ruler. But as a prisoner, he is the key to the southern city's peaceful surrender. If they see their heavenly son in chains, they will open the gates to save their own skins. Ulehcha nodded slowly. He signaled Korgal, who had just entered the hall. Bind him, not with silk, but with iron. And the women. He glanced at the concubines. One of them, a young woman no older than me, looked at me with silent, desperate pleading. They were prisoners before you arrived. General, I said, give them to my brother. He will ensure they reach the Qi estate safely. In return, the Qi family will provide the logistics for your occupation of the capital. We know where the grain is hidden. We know which officials can be bought. Ulehcha walked toward me, his heavy presence filling the space. He stopped so close I could smell the iron and the cold air of the mountains on him. He reached out and traced the line of my jaw with a calloused finger. You are not a survivor, Qi Yun. He said softly. You are a predator. I think I made a mistake by letting your brother live. You are the one I should be afraid of. Fear is a good foundation for an alliance. General, I replied, not flinching. Korgal, take the king, Ulehcha roared. Turning away, we burn this villa to the ground. Let the south see the smoke. Let them know the sun has set on Great Ning. As we walked out, the first torches were tossed onto the silken hangings. I looked back one last time. The king was being dragged through the dirt, his royal robes tearing on the gravel. Qi Feng led the concubines out, his expression solemn but relieved. The air outside was cold and clean. The weight that had crushed my chest since the moment I woke up in this life finally began to lift. The revenge was not yet complete, but the chess pieces were finally where I wanted them. The iron wheels of the prisoner carriage groaned as we re-entered the charred gates of the capital. This time, the silence of the city was different. It was the silence of a held breath, not of death. I rode at the head of the column, the wolf seal fur on my wrist catching the light like a badge of office. Behind me, the once mighty king of Great Ning was huddled in a cage of rusted iron, his face hidden behind his filthy hair. The people need to see him, I said to Ulehcha, who rode a pace behind me, his eyes scanning the rooftops for snipers. They need to see that the heavenly mandate has not just been lost, it has been discarded. You are more ruthless than any conqueror I have met. Ulehcha grunted, his horse's hooves sparking against the cobblestones. Most would want to hide the shame of their kin. You parade it. He stopped being my kin the moment he traded my life for an hour of silence. I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. We reached the temporary command center established in the Qi family's former training grounds. In a smaller, wooden cage nearby sat Ning Jiawan. Her maidservant's clothes were torn, her face a mask of dried salt and dirt. When she saw me, she threw herself against the bars, her eyes wild. Qi Yun, tell them the truth. She shrieked, the rag having been removed from her mouth. Father is there. Tell them I am the princess. I dismounted slowly and walked toward her. The guards stepped aside, recognizing the mark on my wrist. I stopped just inches from the bars. The princess is dead, Jiawan, I said softly. Leaning in, she died the moment the king decided to send a shadow in her place. What sits in this cage is a nameless girl who tried to flee while her people burned. Isn't that right, General? Ulehcha walked up behind me, his shadow swallowing her. I see no royalty here, only a girl who screams too much. Jiawan's face collapsed. She looked past me to the iron cage where her father sat. The king didn't even lift his head. He was staring at his own hands, his spirit broken. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was no longer a piece on the board. She was the discarded shavings of a finished game. Take her to the back. I commanded a Qi family guard. Feed her, wash her, and keep her quiet. She is still useful. But not as a princess. As they dragged her away, my brother Qi Feng approached. He had cleaned the blood from his face, but his eyes were heavy with a question he had been holding back since the villa. He waited until Ulehcha had moved to consult with his lieutenants. Yuner, he said. His voice a low rumble. Where did you learn to play this game? You speak of secret tunnels, flooded mines, and wolf seals as if you have lived through this war a dozen times. I looked at him, my heart aching. In my past life, he had died protecting me. His last words an apology for not being strong enough. I had a dream, brother, I said, a half-truth that felt like a lead weight. A dream so vivid it burned my soul. In that dream, we all died because we trusted a man who wore a crown but possessed the heart of a rat. I decided that when I woke up, I would not let that dream become real. Qi Feng studied me for a long moment. He didn't believe the dream entirely. But he saw the iron in my eyes. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. His grip firm and grounding. Whatever it was, he whispered, I am glad you woke up. But be careful. Yuner, the wolf is not a pet. He will turn on you the moment he thinks you are holding the leash too tight. I don't intend to hold the leash, brother, I replied, looking toward Ulehcha's tent. I intend to make him realize that without me, he is just a barbarian in a graveyard. To rule this land, he needs the Qi family's prestige and my knowledge of the southern lords. Inside the command tent, Ulehcha was stabbing a dagger into a map of the southern provinces. He looked up as I entered. The lords of the south are gathering at the Azure River. He said, they have 40,000 men. My scouts say they are calling for a holy war to restore the Ning bloodline. They don't know their king is in a cage yet. They are not fighting for the king, I said. Walking to the table, I pointed to a specific city on the map. Yuzhou. They are fighting for their own tax exemptions and land titles. If you march on them now, you will unite them. But if you send a message from the king himself, ordering them to stand down and recognize the Qi family as the new regents, you divide them. Ulehcha leaned back, crossing his massive arms. The king won't sign that. He still thinks he can escape. He will sign it, I said. My voice cold as mountain water. Because I am going to tell him what happened to the concubines he left behind. And what will happen to Jiawan if he doesn't. And if that fails, I will remind him of the secret shadow guard he keeps in the south, the ones he thinks I don't know about. Ulehcha stared at me, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. You really do know everything, don't you? I know enough to ensure that this time, the Qi family is the one holding the blade, I said. I stepped out of the tent into the cool night air. The palace was still smoldering on the horizon, a tomb for the old world. I looked at my hands, they were clean, but I could still feel the phantom blood of my past life. This was only the beginning. The king was the first to fall. But the lords who had cheered for my father's execution were still out there, and I had a very long memory. The ancestral altar of the Ning dynasty was a place of cold marble and bitter iron. Today, it was stained with the soot of a fallen empire. I stood on the upper dais, the wind whipping my heavy silk robes, not the robes of a sacrificial lamb, but the attire of a regent. Below me, the southern lords knelt, their foreheads pressed against the freezing stone. They had come to fight a holy war, but they had stayed to swear fealty to a new reality. The king was brought out. He wasn't in a cage this time, but he looked smaller than the iron chains that bound his wrists. His eyes were hollow, fixed on the scroll I held in my hand. The king has realized that the mandate has passed, I announced, my voice carrying across the silent square. He has seen the smoke of the capital and the strength of the northern tribes. To save the lives of the people, he abdicates. He names the Qi family as the protectors of the realm. A ripple of murmurs went through the lords. Duke Wei, the most powerful of the southern coalition, looked up, his face etched with defiance. And why should we believe a girl holding a traitor's sword? Where is the Princess Jiawan? I signaled to the guards. A figure emerged from the shadows. dressed in the royal crimson of the first princess. She walked with a stiff, mechanical gait. Her face veiled. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The princess has taken a vow of silence to mourn the fallen, I said, my gaze meeting Duke Wei's. She stands here as a witness, unless, of course, the Duke wishes to examine the Shadow Guard rosters I found in the king's private study, the ones that list exactly how much gold you accepted from the enemy to delay your reinforcements last spring. Duke Wei's face went from pale to ashen. He lowered his head again, his fingers trembling against the stone. The threat was silent but absolute. I had the secrets that would hang every man in this square. The king stepped forward, forced by Ulehcha's heavy hand on his shoulder. With shaking fingers, he pressed the great seal onto the abdication decree. As the red ink dried, the Ning dynasty, which had stood for 3 centuries, effectively ceased to exist. Take him to the monastery in the western peaks, I commanded. He will live out his days in prayer. No visitors, no ink, no crown. As the guards dragged the broken man away, Ulehcha stepped beside me. He looked at the kneeling lords, then at me. The sunlight caught the bronze of his armor. You promised them peace, Ulehcha whispered, his voice low and dangerous. But my men want a city to loot. How do you intend to satisfy the wolf, Qi Yun? The looting is over, General, I replied, turning to face him. The treasury is empty, but the trade routes to the west are now open. The Qi family will facilitate your passage, and in return, you will be the iron shield that protects our borders. You will have a kingdom to govern, not a ruin to scavenge. Would you rather be a thief for a night, or a founding father for an eternity? Ulehcha stared at me for a long time. Then, to the shock of every person in the plaza, the barbarian general dropped to one knee. He didn't bow his head, but he placed his curved blade at my feet. The wolf knows when he has met his master, he said, his voice booming. The north follows the phoenix. My brother, Qi Feng, stepped forward from the flank of the army. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and sadness. He knew that the sister who had played in the gardens was gone, replaced by someone forged in the fires of a life he would never understand. But he also saw that our family was safe. Our father's name was cleared. It is done, Yuner, he said softly. No, I replied, looking out over the city as the first banners of the new regency were raised. It is beginning. The weight of my past life, the cold cells, the screams of my kin, the betrayal that had cut deeper than any blade finally vanished. I had not just survived the storm. I had become the wind. I stood on the altar, the master of my own fate, watching the sun rise over a world I had rebuilt from the ashes of my own death. This time, the history books would be written in my hand. The story is now complete. Thank you for listening. Feel free to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.